Welcome committee members, liaisons, and members of the public to the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission Program Development and Impact Committee meeting. Excuse me. Thank you for joining us. We are using Zoom with the goal to foster a more inclusive environment and effective meeting. If you would like to comment during the meeting, please use the raise hand feature and please utilize this tool to virtually indicate you would like to speak in order to help the chair facilitate the discussion. A friendly reminder, this is a video conference. Per Bagley King requirements, all cameras must be kept on during the duration of the meeting. If you're unable to have your camera on, you must indicate a reason for your non-appearance during the meeting. Please be aware of the surroundings behind you. All meetings will be recorded and posted to the State Bar's website. Zoom captioning is available. To enable, select live transcript at the bottom of your Zoom screen, then select enable transcript. Thank you.
Thanks, Kim. Danielle, can you take roll?
Yes. Alikani? Babcock?
Here.
Campbell?
Here.
Escobedo?
Here.
Mahoney? I saw Tammy
She should be joining soon.
Okay, I saw her in the attendee pool.
Yeah, trying to promote her.
Okay. Smith?
Present.
And Rosie.
Here.
Judge Rosie. Great. We currently I'm sorry?
We're waiting for, we're going to wait for, are we waiting for Tammy to be promoted? We can come back to her.
Yeah, and we even without Tammy, we have 5 present, 2 absent, so we have quorum.
She should be coming on screen in a minute.
Okay, great. And then for advisors, do we have Judge Yang? I don't see him. Okay, absent. And then I will note liaisons. I see Selena. I see Lauren in our attendees. I believe I saw Zach in attendees. Melanie is absent, but is Yoon here? No. Okay. And then I'll note State Bar staff. I don't think we need to read those out.
Okay. Thanks, Danielle.
Of course.
Okay. This is the part in our meeting where we ask members of the public to make public comment if there's anything on our agenda that folks would like to speak to. We will give folks 2 minutes to speak. I'll note for the meeting minutes that we received 2 written public comments that were distributed to the commissioners earlier today, one from Public Counsel, one from Neighborhood Legal Services. And is there anybody, Kim, that wishes to make public comment right now?
There's 2 people with their hands raised. I'll let the first person speak.
Thank you.
As we're muting that person, I'm noting that Tammy Mahoney and Jacqueline Alikani are both now present.
Great.
Hello.
Welcome, both of you.
Hi.
Nice to see you both.
Hi. Sorry, I just had a blackout. Everything came back on just now. Thank you.
Hi, this is Steph Carroll from Public Counsel. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the opportunity to comment. I'm speaking on behalf of Public Counsel, a non-profit law firm advancing civil rights and racial and economic justice. We partner closely with the courts and communities and currently operate 2 court-based clinics supported by partnership grants. My focus today is on impact and on project design and technology. Looking at project design and technology first, we encourage viewing project design and technology as a foundational lens across evaluation. Design and technology choices shape service delivery, staffing, and what impact data can reasonably be collected. We would also point the committee to the Legal Services Corporation's Technology Summit report that's a call to action to civil legal services to accelerate the use of transformative technologies to narrow the justice gap, and underscores the essential need for grant makers to develop flexible and adaptive evaluation frameworks that foster innovation and experimentation by grantees. With respect to impact, we appreciate the committee's effort to clarify outputs versus outcomes in the impact criteria. However, we are concerned that true self-help clinic models, especially court-based clinics, may be unintentionally disadvantaged. For example, our guardianship clinic is intentionally non-representational. We do not form attorney-client relationships or track case outcomes to preserve ethical boundaries and court alignment. We're open to and can serve both sides in a guardianship case. As a result, the most appropriate impact data we can collect consists of perceived outcome measures, such as increased understanding of court processes and confidence in next steps. We respectfully urge the committees to ensure the rubric explicitly values these perceived outcomes so self-help clinics are evaluated equitably. Finally, as you consider funding proposal, we urge caution in destabilising established programmes. Partnership grant funding is difficult, if not impossible, to replace, and its loss can undo years of investment. For example, our appellate clinic, which lost funding in times past, meant our clinic went from a full-time model to being able to provide only 1 day a week service. Thank you very much for your time and continued commitment to Access for Justice.
Thank you to Public Counsel. We have one more, Kim.
Actually, it's two. I'll let the next person speak.
Good afternoon. You're all able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. My name is Nicole Perez. I'm here on behalf of Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles, yet another nonprofit law firm here in Los Angeles County that works to achieve equal justice for people living in poverty across our great county area. I'm here too to submit public comment regarding the proposed 2027 partnership grant scoring rubric. First, I'd like to say that we are also in support of the written comments that you've received from Neighborhood Legal Services of Los Angeles County. Here at Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles, we've been partnering closely with the court for over 20 years to deliver high-quality courthouse-based assistance to self-represented litigants. And while we are very much appreciative of the concerns that have been raised in changing the scoring rubric and believe that they are well-intentioned, particularly in regards to the equity factors, we do have concerns around potential inequitable outcomes that may be coming from that. In particular, I'd like to highlight just 4 areas that we would like to ask the Commission to pay close attention to. First, to mitigate any risks with inequitable outcomes, we'd ask that you please explicitly incorporate population size, poverty rates, and filing volume when balancing those equity factors to determine the final scores of those who would receive partnership grants. We'd also ask that you support high demand issue areas like housing, family law, and domestic violence in favor of diversification. Doing so will ensure that critical resources are continued to fund the demonstrated needs of self-represented litigants here in Los Angeles County, of which housing continues to be a huge unmet need. We also ask that you clarify that the equity adjustments will not reduce support for the state's busiest and highest poverty court system here in Los Angeles County. We too have partnership grants and appreciate the opportunity to provide these comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, yes, I'm Gabby Higgins with NLSLA. So I'm here on behalf of Neighborhood Legal Services of Los Angeles County to express our concerns in the proposed changes to the partnership grant scoring rubric that may result in an inequitable distribution of funding, particularly to Los Angeles County. As the committee considers revisions to the rubric, we ask you consider the following. First, regarding the equity adjustment promoting geographic diversity, we believe that equity-based scoring should account for population size, poverty rates, and filing volume. The LA Superior Court is the largest trial court system in the country, processing approximately 1/3 of California's legal filings. And LA County represents 30% of all Californians living in poverty. The partnership grants play a critical role in addressing this demonstrated need. We believe that capping or reducing funding to Los Angeles County would divert resources away from the state's largest concentration of low-income litigants and undermine the goals of equitable access to justice. Second, with respect to the history of funding equity adjustment, LA County is served by more than 15 legal service providers that actively partner with the court. These partnerships, which have been developed over the past 30 years, exist in direct response to the volume and complexity of self-represented litigants appearing before it. This long-standing infrastructure delivers comprehensive, culturally competent, and linguistically accessible services at scale. We urge the committee to leverage, not penalize, this proven capacity when weighing the prioritization of previously funded versus unfunded organizations. Finally, regarding the diversity of legal focus areas, equity adjustment, legal services providers, including our own, prioritize legal issues based on demonstrated need. The most pressing and highest volume legal areas in LA County are housing and family law, accounting for approximately 90% of self-represented litigants served throughout Neighborhood Legal Services 9 self-help centers. And with new underfunded areas would risk diverting resources away from the most consistently demonstrated needs of the litigants. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Kim, do we have any other public comment?
That was the last person.
Okay, thank you. Okay. We are now into the agenda item, which is the chair's report. So welcome everyone to our meeting today. I want to specifically welcome Tammy, who is joining the PDI committee, not new to the Trust Fund Commission, but new to PDI. So welcome, Tammy. Thanks for being here. And we are all available to you if you have questions about PDI. As a reminder to folks who may be new to PDI or listening in for the first time, the purpose of the PDI, the Program Development and Impact Committee, is to advance the trust fund support for legal aid through new initiatives, innovations, and stakeholder engagement. And so the things that we'll be discussing today will go along with that. We have 4 items on today's agenda, 2 that we will spend the most amount of time on as they are voting items. The first are the proposed changes to the 2027 Partnership Grant RFP, which we just heard public comment on. And then the second will be a recommendation to delegate authority to this committee to approve the 2025 to 2029 supplemental CalHFA 2 funding, which we'll talk about a little bit more. And then we have some informational items, some updates on the legal aid interagency roundtable work and the Justice Technology Collaborative. And I think that that's everything on our agenda. We did have an item on our agenda 4.2, which was proposed changes to the Legal Aid Leader Fellowship Grant. But we have tabled that. Staff went through that. We're going to add it to our March 19th, I think is our next meeting, March 19th, 2026 meeting instead. Danielle, do we have any updates from State Bar staff?
I'll just quickly, this will be very brief, quickly, yes, call your attention to that March 19th meeting. Thank you all for your flexibility in getting that additional meeting scheduled. That should be now on your calendars, and you'll hear from us soon on RSVPs and getting materials up and going for that. But that is a later addition to the calendar, so wanted to draw your attention to it. That's the extent of the staff report.
Great, thanks, Danielle. Let's move to item 3.1 on our agenda, which is approval of the October 24th, 2025 open session minutes. Were there any changes? I think that some folks might have made some comments, or did we make changes, Danielle, on meeting minutes?
So Erin had helpfully pointed out, thank you, Erin, that we had inadvertently copied I think it's 4.4 is listed twice, the title of that agenda item. And so we will replace that with the appropriate language for what was item 4.5. We'll make that update.
Great. Any other folks have changes to our meeting minutes from October? Seeing no one with a hand raised or flagging me down. Do we want to take a roll call vote on that, Danielle?
We would need a motion and a second, but after
Make a
that,
motion.
yes,
Need a motion,
happy
yeah.
to do that.
No motion.
Okay, I see.
Another-
Campbell moved.
Did someone second?
I see Efrain raised his hand to second. Okay, I will go forward with
And
roll call vote.
just so folks know, even if you weren't at the meeting, you are able to vote to approve the meeting minutes. It's essentially a vote of confidence that your fellow commissioners who were there. So you of course can abstain, but you are also by the rules allowed to on the meeting minutes. Sorry,
Yes.
Daniel, go ahead.
No, totally fine. Alakani. You're muted, Jacqueline.
Yes.
Okay. Babcock,
Yes.
Campbell,
Yes.
Escobedo,
Yes.
Mahoney,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Judge Rosie.
Yes.
All right, we have 7 yeses, 0 nos. Motion passes.
Thank you, everyone. Moving right along, we will dive into our item 4.1, which is the 2027 Partnership Grant RFP. We have Crystal and Joyce both here from State Bar staff, and then the PDI commissioners who worked on the project with the excellent guidance of State Bar staff were myself and Ken Babcock.
One second, let me get situated. Okay,
Thanks,
go ahead.
Crystal. Great. Can everyone hear me? Yeah, wonderful. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joyce Song. I'm a program director with the Office of Access and Inclusion, and I'm here with my colleague Crystal, who's a principal program analyst with our office, here to present on agenda item 4.1. Just want to, acknowledge the work of our working group members, Judge Rosie, Ken Babcock, and Melanie Snyder, who I know couldn't make it today. But it was definitely a group effort. And so just want to do a quick shout out for everyone who participated in this process. Also just want to quickly acknowledge the public comments that came through earlier, as well as in written form a few days ago. Hopefully this is an opportunity for us to talk through some of those areas to be able to come to an agreement in the end. So I'm just here to kick us off. So maybe next slide, Crystal. Just by way, quick background, I'm sure you're all aware, but partnership grants support joint projects with courts and legal services programs to make legal assistance available to pro per litigants. The source of the funding is through the Equal Access Fund, which provides annual appropriations to improve equal access in the fair administration of justice. And as is obviously apparent, it is a judicial council and this very commission that administers this competitive grant. Next cycle. Quick overview on the timeline. We are here to approve the updates to the partnership grant RFP and application with the intention that it will also be in front of the commission, I believe in March. Is that right? And we'll release the RFP and application also in March. And such that the grant period will start in January of next year.
Okay. Just talking about, before we get into the information in the proposed recommendation, just wanted to provide some context and a brief description of the working group's approach. This is our oldest discretionary grant. It's been through several changes. We've seen sort of fluctuations throughout the year. So the working group felt that data-driven approach would be the best way to ensure funding alignment with community needs. So just sort of summarizing the steps taken to get to the point where we're at with the proposed recommendations. We looked at the past 3 years of partnership grant funding to identify trends and patterns, which we'll see in later slides, such as counties funded and focus areas, and then incorporated some of the findings from existing research, the California Justice Gap Study, for example, things that the Judicial Council has published about access to justice needs in the self-help courts and in the state. We also assess whether historical funding, the existing RFP, and the scoring rubric aligns with the purpose of the grant and its intent and current community needs. And then also layering into that feedback from the prior scoring team members to identify operational challenges or opportunities to improve the RFP and the grant moving forward. And then we also preview these recommendations with legal aid organizations for community feedback prior to posting materials. Okay, so the next couple of slides, we'll just talk about some of the data highlights. A lot of this is outlined in the attachments of the posted memo, but just wanted to highlight a couple of the trends and hopefully provide some context as we get more into the weeds with the proposed recommendations. So the first funding trend we wanted to talk about was the demand versus the supply. And as you can see in this graph, the gap has significantly increased in the last, since 2023. It's outpaced the annual state budget appropriations. That is the amount that we are sort of restricted, like that is what we are confined to and allowed to allocate per year. And you can see that gap, that there's just been an increased number of proposals. It's been really competitive. So the amount funded versus the amount available for sort of a representation. Okay, so the second one, we also wanted to look at sort of the range of funding from 2023 to 2026, comparing the minimum and the maximum awards from 2023 up until this most recent grant year. And you can sort of see fluctuations here. The amount, sort of the top of the amount has changed, I think, from 2023 onward. You see that sort of cap or the maximum amount trend upward, as well as the minimum amount, which was in the 20 to 17,000 range up until 46,000, which was this most recent grant cycle. Okay, and this I think will come up for discussion as well. We also looked at counties funded, just comparing 24 to 26. It may be a little bit hard to read, but I just wanted to show currently where projects are funded. This also has the numbers of projects funded, and then the counties that they're at. Those are the ones in the blue, and then the ones in the gray, which we highlighted in the memo. Those are the ones who currently don't receive any partnership grant funding. Total number of projects is also here for comparison: 37, 29, and then in this most recent year, we funded 35 projects. Okay, and then this is sort of the last data slide for consideration. Looking at the focus areas that have been funded over the last 3 years, and I think this was also mentioned during public comment: housing and family domestic violence. That is where most of partnership grant funding has gone. And you'll see that the projects have covered sort of a range of the 13 areas of substantive areas of law focus areas over the last couple of years, but there sort of is a range, and you can see those differences comparing year to year. Okay. I don't know if there's any questions about data, or I will move forward to the recommendations. This is just for context. Yeah. Selena.
Well, I was curious if you could explain, I understand, but I think a lot of people who are watching don't understand why it drops down from year to year, why it's not, a more steady amount of available funds in the prior chart slide.
Drops down and sorry, which slide, Selena?
Go back, I think one more. One more. Here, can you explain why there is a dip and it's not more stable for funding? In 2025, it dipped down and then came back up in 2026.
Yeah, thanks for raising that. Yeah, so in 2026, this most recent year, this was the year where we had incorporated partnership grant reserves. I think that weren't previously allocated, so that's why there was the bump. Standard. The typical sort of baseline partnership grant funding is in the 3 to 3.5 million range. This 2024 with the 4.6. I'm trying to recall if this was the PG 2.0. There was an additional supplemental funding, but generally the range has been in the 3 million to 3.5 range. Yeah. Okay. Afraid?
Thanks for that, Crystal. Just curious, because you did show a lot of great kind of views of the awards and way to splice it. Is there one that shows something more on population served. So you showed geography, you showed focus area, but you didn't show who was served. I'm just wondering, we may not have the data, so I'm just curious.
And that is really it. We don't have the data or it was not included for the analysis. I think the focus was sort of looking where the monies went, more so than maybe that the outcomes or number served. Okay, Judge Rosie.
Yeah, my question on the last slide, if you want to flip back to that, I don't know if you, there you go. Can you talk a little bit about what might be in other? Because other, do you see what I mean by that? What is underneath juvenile is other?
Yeah, specifically, I'd have to look at the proposals again, but I want to say there was like a name change clinic that I think we funded in the last 3 years. I can't quite recall. We've been looking at this data, but the specifics, but that one I believe has been under the other category.
Okay. The only reason I ask is because it's the third highest amount after.
I see.
Yeah, family and housing.
Okay, that addresses data questions. I'll move on to the proposed recommendations. Okay, proposed RFP updates. So 3 main goals after looking at data, funding trends, was to prioritize equity, efforts to streamline the application process, and building transparency over decision making. A couple of general guidelines that the working group is recommending. Number 1 is no more than 3 proposals will be accepted per applicant, confirming that the grants will have 1-year terms. That is also a 6-month carryover is permitted, subject to commission approval. Applicants, this is a new request, is applicants will be asked to calculate and provide the minimum amount needed to operate the proposed project. In past applications, we've just asked for the requested funding amount. So the working group wanted more information just to understand at a minimum what would be needed for operations as it gets closer to funding recommendation determinations. And then 4, if selected, grantees will be subject to relevant reporting requirements, which are not new, but just highlighting that will be part of the requirements if selected for funding. The proposed RFP has also been updated to indicate that previous funding levels do not guarantee future funding levels, partly due to the available funding per year. Over 6 million is very different than over 3 million available for funding. So there's no guarantee that it would inform this upcoming year's decisions. Couple more details. Maximum, let me move over my screen here. Maximum of 100 points. Previous scoring rubrics was 105 points with some bonus categories, which we'll talk about in a little bit. The recommendations also recommend decreasing the number of categories from 6 to 5, as partly due to consolidating continuity planning into administration. Also including a new category called project design and technology, and then removing the optional innovation category and bonus points, trying to sort of emphasize sort of its use and the acknowledgement of technology and how it informs project design and impact. That was part of the reason. Removing funding priorities, which would then be sort of replaced, or this new concept of equity adjustments instead. So there's a lot of text on screen. I'm not going to read them out loud, but these are the 5 categories, and I'll briefly talk about it. Folks can also read it on the screen. And the proposed number of points are also listed there. The first one is court involvement. This is largely the same as the current, as the 2026 RFP, but we just wanted to add a little bit more description as to different aspects that the scoring team and the committee would be looking at. And I'm also happy to go back to the previous slides if folks need a little bit more time. Okay, impact, 20 points. Again, this is a category that is in our state bar rules sort of as a required category. It is very similar to the 2026 RFP, and this point has come up, and we've mentioned this before. It aims to differentiate between outputs and outcomes. There are decision outcomes referenced here. I think the intent with the working group was to understand the proposed project on a more holistic level. And some of these examples were just given to illustrate some of those related outcomes. Previously, under the impact category, we are still going to ask about number of clinics, number of clients that or number of self-represented litigants you plan to assist during the year. But we want to just more on a larger level and strategy level. Wanted to know how that proposed project is responsive to the needs. What are the larger goals? So maybe prevented eviction may not be, and this is also open for the committee to weigh in as a good example. But perception outcomes, which I believe were mentioned during the public comment, those are highlighted there, and definitely something that the committee will factor in.
Can I add something there, Crystal?
Thank you.
Because I know there had been some comments around kind of the perhaps concern around over-reliance on sort of legal decision outcomes, and that was certainly not our intent here. I think what we were trying to capture was allowing applicants to describe the wide array of ways that they evaluate success in their project. And a lot of it is output, and we get that particularly with self-help clinics where you're doing brief representation, but we also understand that there are organizations and programs that collect other types of data, and we just wanted to be able to provide the opportunity for applicants to share that with us, and it'll be a narrative. So there's no quotas in terms of we need to see this number of people who have been able to benefit from not being evicted. That's not really our intent here. We're not judging on that. We're kind of looking at how you're evaluating. And so that, I think, is kind of what our stress is on here. I don't know, Judge Rossi and Ken, do you have, because I know this came up in our conversations as well.
I mean, I would just throw in that I echo what you said, and Joyce, and from a court standpoint, we don't, we're trying to measure all the ways in which success can be measured, and I think we don't want to necessarily. Well, we're not wanting to say you prevented 15 evictions, because that does become tricky, right? If when you're talking about a court partnership, you don't want to necessarily give the impression that that what we're focusing on is a specific decisional outcome. I think that just becomes tricky for the courts. So I think that it makes sense that we open up, and as you said, give it an array of outcomes, all the ways in which success looks, and success looks different in every place. So.
And I would just add that I think Joyce's comments and Judge Rossi's comments are really reflective of the conversations that we had at the working group level. And I think that one thing we might want to consider, and the language may be there. I've got it on a different screen that I'm looking at the actual language of the RFP. We may want to have the kind of clarification that Joyce just gave in her explanation of what we were looking at for outcome measures, a little more than just saying the words perception outcomes, and really describe that in a little more depth. And I think that would allay some of the fears that were expressed in the public comments about the difficulty of tracking outcome measures in a self-help context. As Judge Rossi said, we're not looking for the outcomes of one particular result or another. We're just trying to look at something more than just the simple output measure, which is really all we've been looking at in the past.
I'll pause here for any questions or comments before we move on, because I know this one had several questions.
I can only see,
Just one
folks who are
other
here.
thought,
So if there
Crystal.
are, if there are other people who want to make comments, I can only see what
Just a
what is raised.
quick note again, like I just want to reiterate, this is we're doing like a holistic review of the array of sort of array of ways that organizations track their impact. So this, it's not an exhaustive, right? Like we're trying to like incorporate all sorts of ways. And that was really the intent behind this.
Okay, I will move on to the other categories. Okay, so the next category, evaluation, 20 points. Again, this is in our state bar rules for regarding scoring rubrics. So the description, again, I feel like it is similar to the 2026 RFP, but in this updated category description, we're seeking to better understand the projects and the organization's evaluation plan. So we try to be a little bit more specific, sort of giving better parameters with the updated category description. The next category is administration, 20 points, again, 20 points as well, similar to the 2026 RFP, but we're also aiming to better understand the project's organizational capacity. And as mentioned, because this is consolidated, the continuity planning beyond the grant period or the grant cycle. So it's a larger category, partly because we're consolidating and including continuity planning because it seemed to be relevant to to sort of nest them under the same category. Okay. And this category is a new one that the working group is proposing, project design and technology. It's not like the 2026 RFP because it was not there before. This is a new category that aims to clarify how well an applicant's proposed delivery model is grounded in thoughtful needs assessment and responsive to community needs. We had included technology here just understanding like how it can help a project. It can help, with impact and administration. A lot of these categories, they do overlap, so it is a little challenging to sort of clearly define them. But if there is a link that grantees may or applicants may want to make of how technology helps improve their goals or their outcomes related to impact, that should definitely, but that is not limited. You can that could be included to the proposal, but just having a sort of a designated category to be more explicit about this. Vanetta.
Hi, thank you. I think the point that the one of the public speakers mentioned is important. Obviously technology is evolving, and even we're in the process of trying to assist organizations with establishing, good approaches. But I think when they're writing, considering this description, is it possible for the organizations to be, kind of aspirational? How they anticipate developing this, as opposed to having to demonstrate a clear utilization of it. Because as they mentioned, some may not have that bandwidth, but obviously they may have the interest. So I think it's important to include this topic, but just wondering how much flexibility there is for the applicants.
I'll open up to my fellow working group members if you wanted to chime in with any initial thoughts about that.
I mean, I don't think that, I'll speak for me personally, not for the rest of the working group. But I was thinking more along the lines of what's actually being used or what is planned to be used, as opposed to, although I guess, of course, if things change down the line, but I was thinking more of what are they actually going to use if they have legal technology that they're already implementing, or if they're already using some sort of AI strategy to for efficiency purposes, more about what they were actually going to do rather than it being aspirational, I think is the word that Vanetta just used. So I was thinking of more concrete, but Ken maybe has different thoughts.
It's slightly different, but not that different. So I think that one of the concerns is that we've got a 1 year grant term. We actually talked about the possibility of changing these grant terms to multiple year grant terms, but given the source of the funding and the necessary legislative approval of the budget, it didn't make any sense to do that. And so in the 1 year period, I mean, aspirational in the short term, sure. I would see that as something that would be okay for a program to articulate. But if it's something that over the next 5 years we intend to do this, well, great, but we're really only looking at year one because that's all we're funding is year one. Because we don't have the flexibility, given the budget, to fund anything more than 1 year.
Yeah, great point. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. Efrain.
Yeah, really like this category, and I think the intentionality behind the technology is welcomed. I think it's important, especially as we're always having conversations about scaling and how do we scale better. This is really a path to it. I wonder though if, in addition to that, there might not have been more of an opportunity to also really highlight the innovation part. There are a lot of things that are innovative that are not necessarily hard technology, but could be collaborating with a different kind of partner, bringing in a different agency. And I don't think in any of our categories we really prioritize, since we're looking at, one of our priorities is addressing systemic issues. Sometimes it's that programmatic innovation. So just wonder, I don't think it would require like major revision. It's just saying program design, tech, and innovation. Just to make sure that we're considering that, looking at that, and the technology part might be great to have, and I think we should encourage it and incentivize it in this way. But that's the only thing that came up for me. It's not a concern. It's just more a both and, right? Are we missing opportunity to put innovation up here, and partnership is the critical part here. Maybe there was a way to also lift that up.
Can I respond to that quickly? Thank you so much, Efrain. And I think that actually somewhat addresses or the concern around I think there was a point made in one of the letters around ensuring that other means of service delivery, like other resources that might be utilized in order to provide the services required, could also be elevated. And I think, yes, absolutely, technology is just one of the things, and we highlighted it because obviously it's front of mind for folks, and there is opportunities that we see and we've seen in applications that have given, that they're just opportunities to scale the work to increase impact in some way. But it is just a means to an end, right? In the same way that a lot of things you described, Efrain, whether it's, I don't know, people resources or capacity that have worked in different ways, whether you want to call it innovation or not, that can also impact results. I think is, we definitely just, we want to hear all of those things. So technology is just one of those things, but we did just highlight it here.
Yeah, I'm sorry to speak out of turn, but it just dawned on me with your last comment. I mean, there are so many proposals that we consider that are repeat awards, right? These are programs we've been funding for some time that, whether it's technology, but the innovation part becomes important, where it's like, how are you innovating these programs year to year? How are you changing up what you're doing? So just a final thought on
that. Selena.
Well, following up on that comment, one thing that LAC really appreciated was removing the word innovation as one of the factors. I think that in our community, we're often told to innovate, innovate, innovate. And there's a lot of pressure from private foundations to innovate. What I really appreciate here is that you use the phrase improving or scaling services, which some people may say that's innovation, but a lot of that's just critically looking at the way you're providing services, which I think is captured in program design and whether or not there's technology and how. But what I also liked about Public Counsel's comment is the focus on being flexible, the flexible use of technology, because in the course of a grant year, the court may ask that you use a different technology, and that may not be baked into the original application. If you're working very closely in partnership with the court, they may roll out a new technology or they may change the technology, and then that organization really has to work in partnership with the court. So I think one of our overall support for this change is the removal of innovation, but the focus on program design. And also, I really want to make sure that we're talking a lot about the stability with the courts, because it's not just the legal aid organization that's a participant here. It's the local court is really reliant on these partnership grants. And a lot of presiding judges and court executives are really interested in serving as many people as possible. And that's why we see so many for housing and family law, is that is where one of the biggest areas of need in the court self-help centers really rely on legal aid organizations to provide this increased service in partnership with the courts. So I just appreciate this slide in particular.
Thanks, Selena. Jacqueline.
Okay. Am I unmuted?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. So, I agree with all the other great comments that have been made. And I just wanted to add that, whether we use the term innovation or program design, that those terms do indicate something really important as we face more and more, unknown environmental threats to limited budgeting. So it's going to take a focus on, program design or more innovation to deal with capacity limitations based on funding limits. A lot of which, in the future, we don't know what's going to be happening over the next 3 years. So just wanted to reiterate that.
Thank you, Jacqueline. I will move on to the next slide, but I'm sure there will be more discussion. And then Joyce, I'll hand it off to you.
As you're all aware, this is probably the most significant adjustment to the partnership grant RFP. And we are recommending that we add on an equity adjustment phase after the points have been allocated through the scoring process. The rationale has been, basically driven by the fact that the commission has really had focuses on, or has been interested in focusing on using an equity lens when it comes to our grant making, to thereby, increase statewide coverage supporting underserved courts and populations. Like I said, all the scoring, it'll, the maximum number of points you get is 100, and this adjustment is done after initial scoring is completed. I do want to, I appreciate the conversation around this because I understand all the concerns of losing funding, and also us potentially not taking into consideration large population sizes where there are clearly unmet legal needs. And I want, maybe we can go into the next slide because, this is not a whole list. This is not an exhaustive list, I would say, of the things that we or the scoring committee we're hoping will take into consideration. We certainly don't think of equity as just equal amount of funding per each county. We're really looking at, and we're certainly not thinking of diversity in that same way. It's not an equality thing, it's an equity thing. So we're looking at various factors such as, the ones that we've listed here: geographic diversity, collaboration with underrepresented and underfunded courts, the diversity of legal focus areas, language and digital equity, history of funding. And here I think maybe this will be of relief to some. I mean, the working group was really mindful of the fact that a lot of organizations rely on this funding, and there's been a history of funding for them. And so that is actually an opportunity for us to take that into consideration. It wasn't actually, hey, you're always got this funding and, we're going to cut you off. This is really meant to express that this is a very nuanced opportunity for discussion and discretion by the commission to uplift organizations where we might, because they're in smaller counties and they tend to get, not as much attention, and that has been shown out through our data, that we do want to highlight those and give them an opportunity to receive the funding as well, assuming their project is, close to where we need it to be in terms of its design and scoring. So, that is kind of the thrust behind, we've listed a couple things. It's certainly not exhaustive, but I do want to stress this is, I think probably, I don't want to say a more honest way, but it is just reflecting our commitment to ensuring that to the extent that we can, and given the limited resources we have, we are being very mindful of and rigorous in terms of how we can uplift organizations or projects that might not have been uplifted in the past through this grant. So I know there's probably a lot of discussion to be had here, and I just want to open it up, both to respond to public comment and just if you have any individual thoughts, and would love to have a conversation around that.
Frey.
Yes, thanks for opening it up. And I think it was great that we have public comment, because these are sort of big adjustments, right? And I think we have great intentions. And then we have to balance that with what we think the outcomes might be of that. So I'll keep my comments very succinct and then step back. I think so in general, I'm a little concerned and do think we need to unpack this a little bit more. My biggest question was, what is the commission's definition of equity? We throw it around a lot, but I'm not clear as to how we define what equity is. I think it'd be important to get more clarity on that. And then I see what the areas we would look at. I appreciated your point about geographic diversity, because my initial thing was like, well, we do know that equity is not diversity, right? Like they're very different things. So I appreciated that you made that distinction right off the bat. So here, my concerns here are somewhat in some of the ways that we're structuring this. I think, I'm not as clear on some of the things, so I'm unable to see where it's at. But like, for example, historically underrepresented and underfunded courts. What is that? Like, I understand what that means in terms of communities and the harms we've suffered, but I'm wondering what that means. Does that mean the size that you are of a court, or is it taken into consideration the disparate cases and the amount of people you have to serve and the funding you receive relative to that versus what you usually get, and not necessarily your need for it? And then I just did want to weigh in because size has become a factor. I do think that we need to be clearer and more nuanced. I would add to some of the public comment. I am based in Southern California. Is in these conversations, it's not really the number of people in size. It's that one factor combined with the disproportionate level of inequity between that size versus other sizes, right? It's the overlapping inequities and injustices and high need communities that a per capita, what is the per capita of underrepresented, underserved, indigent communities versus another? So I think thinking about it in linear terms is just like you have this many total population and this county has this many, is probably not good for us. We should be thinking of per capita. What is the per capita need based on the concentration? I think it's not the issue of size, it's the issue of the concentration of that need is where you see the inequity. And so just wanted to raise that and hear how we will take that into account. And then lastly, I do think that, points like address systemic inequities sound great, but you have to get very practical on them. For me is really like, okay, well, how are you taking into account when you talk about systemic inequities, 1 year funding is probably not going to change the system. And so how are you actually taking into account the historical equity has to do a lot with history. So the historical harm that has been done, how do you factor that in when you're looking at geographies? What geographies have been more impacted by deep historical harm from the justice system, right? And that needs to become a factor too, which I really don't see us clearly uplifting it. I think in values and spirit, we do. And so my final point is really around being mindful of the moment. I think it's great that we're being diligent of our job and how to improve our systems, but there is a world that's going to shambles externally at the same time. And so we could look at this really great, but how are we going to factor in current environmental, economic, and both policy, political crises that have totally exploded the need? You can look back and say, well, here's how we've been funding for the last decade. That decade existed in a different world. And so I think that it would behoove us that while we're trying to do this, for the time being, we should be thinking about how are we considering the current realities that we are facing from wildfires and how that's going to impact housing and evictions, from the literal invasion of some communities like Los Angeles by federal agents, people not going to work, losing jobs, all of these things. Like, we got to at least talk about it. Like, I could read this memo and think that everything's going great in California. So I share all this to make sure that we're addressing these issues. But this last point about we cannot be deaf to what's happening externally, it should impact our equity sense. And there is a geographic inequity on who is suffering this violence right now. And so that's going to have to be weighted in as well. So thank you for the floor. I'll step back now.
Ken.
Yeah, I think I mean, Efren, your comments as usual are very well spoken and well articulated and spot on. I think that what we were trying to get at here, this is just my opinion from working with the working group, was to try and get beyond the four corners of the grant application and to look at other issues, some of which you articulated, some of which are articulated on the screen, some of which may not be articulated either in your comments or on the screen. And as Joyce said, this isn't the exhaustive list. This is just a new thing that we're looking at, and this is our first stab at what that new thing might look at. But the idea is, rather than just look at the four corners of the grant application and determining who's going to fund, who we're going to fund, and who we're not going to fund, to look at other things that are going on in the real world. Some of those things may be historical. Some of those things may be happening at the moment. Some of those things may be happening in the near future. But to consider those things in reviewing applications and making adjustments where appropriate to account for that external reality that programs are faced with. Because historically, as I understand it, we were only looking at the four corners of the application and not really considering anything else. And this is a first attempt at trying to get beyond that.
Thanks, Ken. Judge Rosie?
Unmute myself. Sorry. Yeah, I mean, I had a couple of thoughts, and I hear where folks are going, where the public comment is going, and I understand Efrain's concerns, and frankly, having just scored, CalHFA 2, where we talked about these kinds of things and wanting to add equity into those grants. I mean, I guess for me, I want to echo what Ken said, which is this isn't intended to be an exhaustive list of what we mean by equity adjustment factors. We couldn't make an exhaustive list, even if we wanted to. And so we're trying, at least from my point of view, we were trying to address, broadly, many of those things that Efrain was just talking about. When it comes to, and I hear what folks are saying about the population in Southern California and especially in LA County and the court system there. I guess for me, part of geographic diversity, and I don't want to lose touch with this, is there are in fact places in California that are legal deserts where there are not enough attorneys to do this work. And so when we talked about geographic diversity, at least for me, it was leaving open this idea that we were going to try to be serving places. And so when I see underrepresented or, underfunded courts, all courts are underfunded. Let's be very clear on that. But if I may just say that. But for the underrepresented piece and the geographic diversity, for me, that was speaking to this idea that there are places where there are not 15 legal service providers who have self-help clinics in the courts. There are courthouses where there are none, in counties where there are none, counties where there are not enough attorneys to help the people that need the help. And I learned this quite clearly when we were reviewing the CalHFA. So I want to be mindful that for me, at least, when we're talking about underrepresented and geographic diversity, we're also talking about those places that don't get the attention, where there are also people who are impacted by wildfires, soaring insurance rates, fear of, police and federal folks coming in, not just, in LA County. And then the other piece was that I felt like this was really speaking to this idea of we cannot give everybody. I wish that we had the money to give everybody exactly what they need, and we don't. And so we have to make hard decisions about how we do address systemic inequities. And maybe there's a better way of saying systemic inequities. But we have a legal system that isn't fair to everyone, and so I envision this category being broad enough for whoever is scoring to take into all of these things, and also including the fact that there are other grants, especially ones that the Trust Fund Commission helps administer, that will address some of these areas. We have CalHFA that helps try to address some of the housing issues, and I know housing is a big thing. So that's how I envision this category, not as an exhaustive list, but as a way of providing whoever is reviewing this the opportunity to take in the other stuff that goes into it. And so, for what my 2 cents are worth.
Yeah, and just oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say thank you, colleagues, and I do know this is one, opening this up and doing this is critical. So I appreciate that work, and I think we'll never get to the right list, to both your point, Judge Rosie, and Ken's. I think hopefully with this conversation, right, and us articulating the points, that these minutes and conversation can we carry through to staff and to reviewers to say, this is how we should think about it. These are the perspectives, because we won't get the right rubric. The rubrics are never right, but it's all that accompanying kind of dialogue and conversation. And if you read through the memo, there's a lot of discretion being given. So I think allowing for this robust conversation hopefully will provide more context and background, even if it's not for the reviewers on it. So I appreciate that opportunity and all the work that's gone into really kind of fine tuning it from where it was. So it looks great.
Thank you, Erin. Erin.
Yeah, thank you for this really excellent conversation. A lot of the earlier thoughts I had have already been covered by folks, and I really just kind of agree with kind of broadly with like all the public comments and everything that the commissioners are saying. I do think we collectively as a group have really good intentions, and I like the direction that we're going. And then the trick is doing the absolute best that we can to put it on paper. So I think what I would say now, maybe to try to boil it down, like 3 points. So I do agree we're never gonna, it's not possible to have the perfect list and a truly kind of inclusive list. And I wonder if we could try to do like add a little more here, or flesh out a little bit more about what we're talking about. Some of the points Efreen was raising, I think, are really well taken, so that because as I look at it, it actually reads like an exhaustive list. Consideration will be given to this. There are 6 things here. So like if you're an applicant, I'm going to think like these are the things. It's so maybe there's just some more flexible language we can use as an introductory phrase. But I also kind of, I would like to see if we can add in some of these other points from the public comment, which I think are really well taken, on concentration of poverty, numbers of filings, the points that Fran was making of like overlapping inequities that, different communities experience differently. Like, can we articulate some of that now? And to your point, Efreen, like, if any of the 6, 7 of us are on the scoring team, we were all here for this conversation. That's great. I suspect that the scoring team is going to have 2 other commissioners who were not here at this meeting and probably are not going to take the time to listen to the 3-hour recording of this meeting, to like hear all this. So I do think that while this can never be truly perfect words on paper, like if we can try to capture some of what we're talking now on the page, I would like that. I also just kind of want to, we're not going to solve this point today, but I want to underscore something that Efreen has said today, and I believe at our last meeting when we were talking about the CalHFA, which I would love to see the commission work toward, is a collective kind of mutual understanding of what we mean by equity and what guiding principles or frameworks we are using. So I think this is, first of all, like really well-intentioned and great and good progress, and like really important to be adding in to this grant in particular. And I spoke up a lot during CalHFA around these topics. And I still feel like, is this right? Like, what do we mean? And is this the best framework? And I think like educating ourselves around I'm hoping there's scholars and academics and, community organizers and others who have done the hard work of figuring out like what a meaningful, workable in practice, definition of equity and like framework looks like. And can we as a commission, over time, that's probably going to be like years, right? Or something, or months, work toward that so that we can have a little better grounding in the conversation and the specific factors that we're putting on paper, a little more confidence that these are the right 6 factors. So that's just kind of like a broader point. And then, but my final and kind of most nitty-gritty point on this, like, there's been some discussion about the history of funding and, current funding isn't a guarantee of future funding, and the need for stability for the courts, for the programs, the courts and programs that have come to be reliant on this funding, and the disruption that occurs when programs are defunded. I completely understand all of that. And I do not have the answer to this, but what I'm just like struggling with is so recognizing the need for continuity, stability, the good work that's already being done. And like, if we overvalue that, how do we avoid just funding the same, let's say 10 programs? I mean, if that's way too heavily, then you just fund the same 10 programs year after year after year after year. And no one has an ability to come in from anywhere else. So just like trying to balance, and I don't know what the answer is. I guess I would kind of end by posing a question to the work group. If you discussed or considered any kind of approach to what I understand there kind of used to be of sort of like an informal understanding that like 5 years might be the end of the road for that, like, so that, like, or some period of time so that you can build up a program, have some stability there, but like you shouldn't really expect it to continue after some period of time. And if you all discussed how something like that might work, given that I understand it's 1 year at a time funding. Thank you. That was a lot. So thank you for your patience.
Amazing. Jacqueline.
Yes. So, I'm really resonating with everything that's been said. And I'm so glad we're having this conversation because equity is critical but it means different things to different people and based on our experiences and exposure. And, as a consumer who has been a beneficiary of some of these actual programs and services that we fund in the past, and I've had family members who've also been beneficiaries. It's so important to define what what we're trying to do so that it can be done, because it's difficult to apply measurements when they're not defined. I mean, it's difficult to actually apply goals that are not well defined. So I'm so glad we're having this conversation, because when I look at this, and I think we're all on the same page in terms of we want to do the best we can for the most that we can. And I really appreciate this and that we think this way. But we also there are a lot of environmental threats that are going to be going on for a while. I don't know how much of, if any of this funding is federal funding or not. Is some of it federal funding, or is it just all state funding?
And this is state funding from the Budget Act.
So none of it's federal.
No federal.
Oh, okay. Then, that makes a difference, because of course, if it's federal, then we have to deal with a lot of executive orders about equity. And we want to be in alignment with that, to protect what we're doing. And, so sustainability is really important. For me, I think sustainability is great, because when you invest in goals and objectives that are not long term, then they just kind of, you kind of apply something and then you don't continue, and then it loses momentum and doesn't really go anywhere in the long term. So I think we do need to particularly, find some terminology to define what exactly this equity is. And also this term here, underfunded courts, I don't really know what that means either. So can someone clarify, if you've done it already? I'm sorry I missed it. What does underfunded courts mean exactly? And when you say systematic inequities, what exactly are some examples of those that when you came up with this terminology that you were thinking of?
I'll just chime in for the underfunded courts, and maybe it's a terminology thing. In one of the attachments, we sort of had the list of all the current partnership grants and historical ones and the partner courts who had those projects. So it was, for me, it was in reference to, I believe it was over 30 partner courts that did not have partnership grant projects. I think I agree with Judge Rossi that probably all of the courts are underfunded, but that was that intention, because we were trying to use the data to help inform the decisions. I'll go through the line based on order of Ken.
So just to answer Erin's last question that she posed, the short answer is yes. We did talk about the issue of continued funding for programs and whether or not that would make it difficult for new programs to come in. In fact, in addition to the reality of the one-year budget from the legislature, one of the reasons that we stayed away from the issue of multi-year grants was the fear that we would be locking out new programs who wanted to apply and would just be locking in existing programs. So yes, the working group did specifically consider that, and that's why we ended up with the one-year grant period.
Thanks, Ken. Judge Rossi?
I would have had wrap up things. So maybe let Nicole, because I see Nicole has her end up too. So maybe let Nicole and then I'll come back.
Okay. Great.
Thank you, Judge Rossi. Just really quickly, and I'm with the Judicial Council. I'm here on behalf of Melanie Snyder and Yoon Kim. We all work together. And I wasn't, of course, in the discussions where these phrases kind of came up. From where I sit, when we hear underfunded courts, I think of that as a very almost insider baseball phrase, that a court, when courts speak of being underfunded, they're really thinking about their overall funding in relation to other courts. So just from a total sort of observer point of view, I can see how using a phrase like that in a grant application would be something that would mean something very specific to one group, and to another group, it would not, they wouldn't have a reference point for it. Jacqueline, you make a good point there. So that's just, I just kind of wanted to posit that we use that phrase a lot, but it's really specific to small, medium, large courts who, are getting who feel that or know who have traditionally been funded at a lower level than their overall needs are, and especially when it comes to serving underrepresented populations. So I hope that's helpful, and I just wanted to chime in with that. Thank you.
Nicole.
Judge Rossi, can I make just one real quick point
You may.
before we wrap things up?
Yeah.
So there was an issue that we talked about a fair amount. It was on one of the early slides that Crystal showed, and it was before we started having this conversation today. And it had to do with the issue of court involvement. And we felt at the working group that for some applicants, the court involvement piece of the application was kind of a pro forma response that we were getting from applicants, almost sort of checking the box that, yeah, we talked to the court and yeah, we got the letter from the court supporting us. But we wanted to make the issue of court involvement more meaningful. And so we beefed up that part of the application so that programs would describe more meaningful cooperation with the court to really encourage programs to develop a good relationship, good working relationship with the court.
Thanks, Ken.
And then just to piggyback on that, I will just mention that as a staff, we're kind of committed to reaching out and connecting with court executives and court administrators this year and following as, just another touch point to kind of understand what courts are experiencing, their challenges, and how we can better support them and through this partnership grant as well. And then a final thought too. I mean, I personally appreciate this conversation, and I think, part of adding on this type of a equity adjustment was to inspire and provide a prompt for this type of really difficult and challenging and conversation. And I think how we're doing this now is emblematic of what may actually, how we will discuss it in scoring. So it's again, like I'm looking forward to that and think it will be a really great, robust conversations in the scoring committee. By the way, if folks are interested in being involved, you can reach out to me or we'll reach out after this meeting. Sorry, Ephraim.
Yes, Judge Rosie, since I know you want to wrap us up, I don't want to then
Well, I don't want to necessarily wrap us, but we gotta
move us. Well, maybe this is where you were hoping to take us, but building on Aaron's suggestion, would like to, I guess, request that, not trying to wordsmith any of the bullets there and know that this is just guidance. We're not codifying anything, is consideration or my proposal for us to consider adding an additional bullet that will just build on the geographic diversity, but more explicitly call out something like, proposals in geographies and populations with highly concentrated, overlapping, and multi-generational indigent populations, right? Which is really what I wanted to get at, and what I really feel if you said you only get one thing, it would be that phrase that I just said. Because I think it really captures that nuance of like, look, the multi-generational, highly concentrated and overlapping is, I feel, something we just can't overlook. So that's my proposal, adding a bullet that kind of really specifies that out so that it's properly top of mind and weighted for reviewers.
Thanks, Ephraim. So actually what I was going to say was, I was actually going to say maybe we say with consideration, including but not limited to the following. So that we actually, because I know that to Aaron's point, it does seem like a list and it does seem slightly exhaustive. And so I was going to just wordsmith it to say, including but not limited to the following things, and not necessarily suggest. But I want to say two things, and we can, and I don't actually know, Crystal, how many more slides follow this one?
I think there's one to talk about, I think two slides.
Okay. So what I wanted to flag for folks is a couple of things. Because I think Aaron said it and Efreen said it maybe first. I agree that the definition of what we consider equity needs to be defined better on a commission level, and highlight for the commissioners and liaisons that were here during our upcoming March 5th, I think it's 5th, right? 5th or 6th, 5th, I think, all day meeting. We are doing a panel that is on equity and grant making. So we are doing a whole program on that at our meeting. And I think that to Efreen, to your point, I think we do need to, at that point, have a discussion, with the entire commission, and so that we can come up with some overall guidance about what we mean by this term, because we use it and we don't have a commission-wide suggestion or, definition. So just to highlight for folks that is something that is coming up, in less than a month or about a month for us to talk about. And I think we do need to have that conversation. And so hopefully a lot of what we're talking about here. The last thing I want to say before we move on to this, before we move on, is to Nicole's point, when I said all courts are underfunded, because when I hear an underfunded court, as a judicial officer, I think something different. I understand what Crystal, your point is a court that's not getting partnership, grant aid. And so maybe there is a better way of saying, rather than underfunded courts, maybe we do need to wordsmith that, because that's why I sort of joked that all courts are underfunded, because I hear that and I think what Nicole is thinking. So I don't know if we want to wordsmith that, but we can think about that. I want you to be able to move on, because we need to be, we need to wrap up this convo so we can move to the next one.
So the next slide is pretty quick. I think we had mentioned this, and I think probably as of this morning, there's been a lot of feedback, and we've discussed that already. Just mentioning it was held on January 15, and there were a couple of concerns and feedback that we've talked through already. And then next steps, if approved today, we will present, because the committee has the authority to approve the updated RFP. It'll be presented at the March 5 commission meeting, and then release of the application would be the following day on March 6. The last slide is just the resolution language. I heard there may be desire to revise the RFP, but I'm pausing here in case we wanted to go back. You can pull up the RFP as a Word doc if there's any urging wordsmith that it's today, or just wanted to know how that would impact the sort of resolution and the votes today.
Yeah, so this committee is charged with doing some of the hardest work that the Trust Fund Commission does. And so I'm so grateful for all of you and for all of your input. We do need to figure out, we need to get something to the full commission in March so that we can actually hand out this money and open the application process up. So I guess get a sense from commissioners. I know Efreen has a wish to add to the equity discussion. I don't know how other people feel. I was happy to just use including but not limited to, and let that work. But from the commissioner standpoint, we do need to, if we have to do any wordsmithing, we need to do that now so that we can actually get this voted on. So Ken, and then Aaron, and
So I'll note that in the actual PDF document that was distributed as part of the agenda, the geographic diversity language is different than what's on the slide. The language reads geographic diversity, comma, including rural and tribal regions. And maybe we want to tinker with that language, as well as tinker with your language, Judge Rossi, about putting including but not limiting to. And this is on page 21 of the PDF that was with the agenda packet. And that's the actual document. That's the document we need to change.
Right, that's the document we need to change. Efrain, do you think that, is there a way to add in what you're talking about there about population density into that geographic diversity point?
I think we could. You could also just, I wonder if there's another part, Ken, where you might want to put it so that there may be some areas that are rural and also have these multi-generation. I'm thinking, right, Central Valley community. So you might not want to just limit it to geography, but maybe it's finding that sentence where we could add that. And then it's more inclusive, but it at least targets those kind of areas. So I did read the PDF, but I don't have it up.
And I think she's pulling it up. And Erin,
Okay.
while we're pulling that up, please share your thoughts.
Yeah, and I think wherever we land on that point, I think I would be fine with. I would like to add that including but not limited to. I think that's an easy and easy to be wordsmith. I do think we should wordsmith the underfunded courts one. I mean, because it seems like we all know what we mean, but this isn't what we mean. Could it say like collaboration with courts that have historically not received a partnership grant?
Sure.
Or just be.
I mean, I think that's what we mean. So let's So let's just say what we mean.
And and I apologize because I didn't mention this in my comments, but back on the outcomes versus outputs conversation. So if I kept it in my brain correctly, I'm hoping there's an easy wordsmith to kind of capture what it sounds like from the public comment and then Joyce's responses that we all mean. That's like, so that we avoid any unintentional, penalizing of like a self-help model where you don't track long-term outcomes. All of those public comments are very well taken. But so something like, let's see, alpha and outcomes appropriate to the service delivery model, comma, something like that, so that then you would have an opportunity to say, well, we're a true self-help model. We don't even know our client's name, so we don't know what they're like, So it could be tailored to the whatever the service delivery model is, the program.
Thanks, Erin. Efrain, and then and I poor Crystal is like.
Yeah, I think I already, since you asked me, I chimed in what I was going to say. I'll lower my hand. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Vanetta. No, maybe not Vanetta.
Hi, just for clarification. So it says tribal regions.
Oh,
I know that tribes are sovereign nations, right? Are they eligible for state funding?
I don't think it's tribal courts. I think it's more the regions, rural regions, and I don't read it as tribal courts. I read it as areas where there may be a legal desert, such as rural areas or areas that have a strong tribal presence.
Okay, all right, thank you.
That's how I read it, but
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then maybe Nicole has her hand up to come up with a better language.
It was just to say, I was literally thinking, instead of such as, you could say, for example. I don't know. That like
for impact.
more like you're
for impact,
giving an example and not saying we want to see this,
Okay, for example, decision outcomes. Great. Thanks, Nicole.
Thank you.
Just a quick process point. I just want to remind folks that approval happens at this committee, and we will just update the commission about the vote.
Yes.
Oh, you mean you don't want to have a whole nother discussion on equity at the commission meeting?
Welcome the discussion.
We will have a discussion about equity.
The discussion.
And hopefully it will guide us in the future. Danielle, yeah.
I think we're just missing a word. If you go back down to the equity adjustments, the second bullet on the courts, collaboration with historically underrepresented courts, if we still want that part, and courts who have not received, we have and there's no noun for what is historically underrepresented.
Got it. Okay. Great. Thank you, Danielle.
And then Ken.
So going back up to the impact one where we just made the change, if perhaps to deal with the issue that was raised in a comment we received from another commissioner, Jason, about not wanting to be perceived as preferring one outcome over another. Maybe instead of where it says decision outcomes, prevented eviction, instead of having the word prevented, we just say eviction or results in eviction cases. So we would know whether we're tracking, are people getting evicted? Are they not getting evicted? It's not that we're preferring one outcome over another with this
Right.
program.
Yeah. That I like that better just because it is touchy. Yeah. Great. Okay. Efrain, yes.
Yes, just so on that equity bullet, still wanted to try and advance this proposal of, can we add that additional bullet, even though we have the inclusive language of not limited to. I think just given the public comment, this conversation, it'd be good to have it in print and say we are honoring this. And so that's something along the line of like geographies and communities impacted by highly concentrated, overlapping, and multi-generational indigent populations or something like that. I mean, staff could probably refine it, but that's, yeah, just wanted to.
Sorry, Frank, could you repeat that?
I think I emailed you some language so you could just cut
Oh,
and paste versus catching it
um,
all. Which is what I literally just what I verbalized right now is I had sent you something like that. So it's geographies and communities impacted by highly concentrated, overlapping, and multi-generational indigent populations or something like that. And
sorry,
then
I'm sharing screens. It's a little hard for me to. I saw your email.
yeah, you're good. You're good. And you could take
Janetta,
out
did you have a
overlapping. You could take out overlapping and just highly concentrated and multi-generational indigent populations.
Janetta? While Crystal was typing furiously, did you have other thoughts?
Just a quick comment. Did we discuss removing history of funding, given that it was only a 1 year allotment and we didn't want to, um, rule out those who had not received funding in the past?
I think that that's just something that we're taking into consideration, but and maybe it doesn't. I mean, I think I think Ken and Aaron both said this week. We want to be mindful of projects that have been ongoing, but we also don't want to um, rule out any new funding of new projects. So I think history of
Okay.
funding was sort of meant to be read. It could be read in both ways.
Okay.
Whether you have a history of funding or whether you don't have a history of being funded. That's how I read it.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
As it sort of it went both ways, and that made it, better.
Okay, that's
Jacqueline.
Thank you.
Thanks for that.
I understand that some of our programs also seniors qualify, and those seniors don't necessarily have to be indigent, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. So then when we talk about a lot of these using these terms of indigent, is it also possible to use the term at risk? Because to me, seniors are in the category of at risk, and I want to know, does this particular, um, what we're trying to do here, these programs also seniors can apply and qualify, right? Senior citizens.
Yeah, because we're talking about partnership grants. So my fear, my friends, is that we might be wordsmithing this so quickly and that we're not that, to Jacqueline's point, well, what do we mean by, should we say indigent and at risk? Should we just say at risk instead of indigent?
Mhm.
And I'm a little concerned that, we're not paying, we're wordsmithing more, which is kind of why I just wanted to say included but not limited to. So I mean, yes, Jacqueline, to your point, we of course seniors could use these services, and we don't mean to exclude it. And I guess that's part of the problem with adding things to this list is that it now feels like, even though we said including but not limited to, that we're now making a list. And that almost locks us into more things than if we had just said it's equity, and equity is included but includes but is not limited to. And then so I'm a little concerned that we're actually limiting ourselves more, even though we're trying to say not limited.
I just want to reiterate your point, Judge Rossi, because I think that
Thanks,
including but
Joyce.
not limited does kind of capture the spirit of what we're trying to get at, and would definitely look to the March and further conversations to really get at more specifically kind of what we mean by equity and grant making, and leave it to the kind of larger commission at the larger commission level. But it does feel like the added language around including but not limited does.
Because because what my fear is that we're now defining what equity is for the whole commission, which isn't something I'm necessarily comfortable with, because I think there are plenty of commissioners who want to weigh in on what equity means and doesn't mean. And so I'm just a little hesitant to be adding more and more things. Like, I think we need to wordsmith the underrepresented courts and all of that. But I'm feeling uncomfortable with us adding more definitions.
And
So,
sorry to interrupt you. So then maybe we can talk about this more when we're defining the term equity. But I find that in a lot of our discussions on the commission, as I understand it, senior citizens qualify for a lot of these programs, but the income limitations don't necessarily apply to seniors, but we don't articulate this issue about seniors. And so a lot of people are not aware that seniors do qualify. So I just want to point that
that's
out.
my point, is that it feels like we're narrowing what equity is in a way that I don't necessarily want to be the one responsible for that when we go to a March 5th meeting and everyone's like, why does it say that? Why do we define equity like this?
And I would definitely
Danielle.
encourage folks, if you're interested in getting involved in the scoring of this, it's a great learning to kind of talk through this stuff as we're looking at the applications. There isn't, this is again, we're having a great conversation, but we probably do want to leave it at the commission level to kind of talk through broader issues of definitions, and leave it a little bit open for the scoring committee to kind of talk through a lot of the different areas in that we want to incorporate for purposes of this grant.
I agree, and I'm not. Just to allay any concerns about the word indigent specifically, statutorily, those seniors are considered indigent, and so they're not a separate qualifying category. But I agree we could do a better job at making that clear that seniors are statutorily indigent.
So even if the senior is a person with a very high level of income, or they would still be considered indigent just because they're a senior.
Yes, I will double check, but that is my understanding, that they are considered indigent Californian. I'm not alone. I see Selena has her hand raised, and she'll know better than I.
Yeah, it's by statute. So it's the statutory definition of indigent really mirrors federal legal services funding. And so it's income-based largely for a legal services corporation, but it's age-based for funding through the Older Americans Act. So that's why that language there. Organizations that serve seniors may do some prioritization based on seniors who are lower income, and their priority areas really will control who comes in the door. But age is defined in the statute.
Sorry, Judge Rosie, I just wanted to take a pause. I think there's a lot of wordsmith edits at the moment. I wanted to confirm. I think the edits made maybe for clarity, but I wanted to confirm with the group. I know we have other items on the agenda. It doesn't sound, I think conceptually it sounds like the committee is all on board in agreement with this updated rubric. And yes, there, especially for equity adjustments, there are maybe refinements to be made, but at the commission level. So I just wanted to pause because there's a lot of edits right now, and I don't know how much longer you want to continue doing this, or sort of at what point will the committee be ready to make a vote?
Yeah. Well, let me hear from Ephraim, and then
Crystal beat me to it. I was going to say, hey, I just wanted to clarify, Judge Rosie, are you saying, okay, let's stop here with what we have now and what we've edited? Are we ready to vote? Or were you
Well,
saying, let's strike anything we've already edited and only pass it as it got here?
yeah,
I
I
guess
mean,
that's not, yeah.
if it were up to me, I would, if it were up to me, and it is not up to me because what I would say is we changed, we put in the including but not limited to, because that gives us broad, that gives the scoring team broad discretion under equity. It gives the scoring team the ability to then take whatever the commission as a whole says. So I would strike the things that we've added to equity, except for the clarifying what we mean by underfunded and including but not limited to. I am uncomfortable with us making a list without the full commission making a list. But I am happy to say including but not limited to, because I think that that allows the scoring team flexibility down the line to say what equity actually means once the whole commission weighs in on it.
Yeah.
And it gives
Okay.
us more time rather than in a tight committee meeting to be defining, something that I think is really important to the entire trust fund and to the
Yeah.
legal aid community as a whole, and every population that we serve. So if it were up to me, I would take out the last bullet point and just clarify what we mean by underfunded, say including but not limited, and be good with what, and then table it until the commission as a whole defines what equity is. That's
Yeah.
me.
I guess just my only concern with that is,
It's not that I don't think that what you're saying is important. It's just that we're making this decision, on the fly without the full commission, and it feels like we're now doing more than we're defining in ways that maybe our fellow commissioners would not love.
yeah, I guess my concern is, one, I think, that this is the place probably to incorporate public comment and in our conversations. And I wouldn't be uncomfortable. I would not be supportive of supporting this RFP if we struck those things out, because at the end of the day, this is the first time this committee gets to weigh in on this list, and this was created by an even smaller group of people. And we are calling out certain other things that, because that group was able to put them in, this larger committee is now being locked out of being able to edit it. So I would love to move with these edits as they showed on the screen, but if not, then I would probably not be able to support the RFP.
Okay.
I hear a motion. Crystal, I also just wanted to flag what I'm seeing for your screen share shows it's not just the Word document, it also has some Zoom overlays.
I don't know what's going on with that. Okay.
Just in case people need to see the language clearly to vote.
Maybe should I share it? Sorry. The motion is, it's not in here, but this is a document. I also wanted just to scroll up again to confirm the edits for impact and equity. Okay. Should I stop sharing screen? Stop sharing screen then.
You're not sharing right now.
Yeah, it just said
we
started sharing, but it's
see anything.
black.
No, I'm having technical issues here. Let me see. So the edits so far, just to confirm, they're on the equity adjustments and then the impact category. Just wanted to confirm if the committee was on board with those edits, or again, trying to think through like what is a necessary refinement versus maybe something to discuss at the commission level.
Yeah, I believe procedurally we have a motion to approve the RFP with the edits that currently exist. That has not been seconded at this time.
I'll second it.
Okay.
I have a question. So the edits that are there right now in red, those are going to remain, because I thought some of those were going to be removed.
The motion that's been made is that those edits stay and be incorporated.
As they are.
Yes.
Okay. And you're going to put it up again,
I
right?
believe Crystal is trying to do that now. Yes.
Tammy,
Okay.
did you just have your hand up briefly? I didn't want to, if you had something to share, I
More
didn't want to.
accidental, but well, I guess if we have a motion, we'll go ahead and pass. I like the idea of the not limited to verbiage. So if there's a motion, then we'll go ahead and move forward and vote accordingly.
We're waiting to see it, but
Sorry, Danielle, I'm sorry. I can't seem to share my screen even though I'm trying to share the Word doc.
Do you mind Teamsing me the link and I can pull it up?
Yes. Sorry, folks.
I mean, after we vote on this, then we have the bigger meeting defining equity and all that. We can still come back to this if other people want to make other changes. There can be no other changes after this.
no. So what we're doing here is approving the RFP. So and that was my concern, was like if we have a full commission meeting and the full commission doesn't like how we've defined equity, we're sort of stuck with it at this point for this RFP, because this RFP, we're having the discussion now. We're not, it's supposed to go to, it's supposed to be, as Joyce indicated before, it's, it's something that's passed by us and we're just letting the full commission know about it. That was why I was feeling a little, yucky about us doing more definition, because the full commission isn't going to get to say they like or don't like this.
Yeah.
And we are going to have a full discussion about what equity means at that meeting. But
Yeah, I guess.
so that's why I was trying to, and I think that's why Joyce was reminding everyone, like, the full commission isn't going to make a pass on this. This is us doing it.
Yeah.
That's why I said we do the hard work here.
Yeah, and I think I guess for me it's because I don't see the bulleted list as a definition of equity. I see it as us saying, because we value equity, even though we're not defining it for you, these are the things we will consider. So to me, the commission meeting is every time the staff throws that word around, are we in alignment of what that means? But I think the bullets are their considerations that the reviewers are going to use, which is why I'm a little bit more adamant about, if we're going to call out rural and tribal and then say we'll lock everything else out. I mean, I mean, the counterpart is, because we don't have a definition of equity, we should be a little bit more clear and inclusive than trying to be less inclusive pending a conversation that won't impact this RFP that's still going to get published on March 6th, less than 24 hours after we meet. So that's why I think we should err on the side of being more inclusive than being more exclusive, because we don't have that definition.
Well, why
So
can't we wait and vote on this after we have the bigger meeting in March?
We can't, because the application has to go out on March 6th.
It's part of the charter of the
I see
PBI
that
committee.
Juan wants to chime in and.
Yeah, and thank you. This is a really great discussion. I've been listening the whole time. But I do want to make a procedural clarification, just because it's now very confusing, so you all know what's on the table. Right now, there's currently a motion by Efrain that's proposed. If you vote yes on the motion, then everything here on the red line sticks. So if you are uncomfortable with that, then you vote no. And then there will be an alternative motion, I assume, with some alternative language, whether that's Judge Rossi or you go back to the original. But I just want to make clear procedurally that everybody understands what's on the table.
Yeah.
So there's currently a motion and there's a second. So I think now procedurally, unless Judge Rossi wants to entertain more discussion, we have to take a vote on that. If you are not in agreement or hesitation, then you need to vote no, so that then there will be another opportunity and another motion. So that's where we are procedurally.
And then can you show the strike-throughs? Because I don't think we've
Yes.
seen them fully.
It's showing up as green instead of red, but it's the same edits.
Can you move the screen up just a little bit?
Move it up.
Danielle, yeah,
Catches the timeline. Yeah.
Sorry, I couldn't see the last thing we'd added. Right.
And
Okay.
I can't help but throw my 2
So
cents in.
yes.
My suggestion, if you're in agreement with Ephraim, then yes, please do vote yes. But if you have any doubt, I would say it's more safe to go back to the original language so that we have a little bit of pause, get the commission's take on it, and then we can always add things to it, right? To clarify that wouldn't be skirting the in terms of if it's additional guidance or this again, this but it's not inclusive list of everything, right? Exhaustive, so that can be further clarification. My worry, and I share Judge Rossi's concern, is if you vote yes, and we haven't kind of thought through all the iterations, the other things have been wordsmithed now for weeks and months. There's been a lot of thought through that. Not saying this is not thoughtful. Then you cannot undo that because the decision stops at the committee level for this grant.
The other way to think about it is you could just say geographic diversity blank. And then that really, so you don't feel like you're prioritizing rural, tribal, or other, and it's just like a broader bullet around geography.
I don't want to lose Dwan's thread though, that like we do have a motion
Okay,
in
so
a second.
Yes, I agree, Joyce, and that's actually until Ken reminded us that it actually said something different. I thought it was just I didn't remember it said other things. So yeah, you're right. We could just strike through that, but we have to procedurally vote on because Ephraim made a motion and I think someone seconded it.
Aaron
seconded. Yes, Aaron seconded. Do you all still see the Word document?
Yes.
Okay. Great.
Yes.
Judge Rossi, do you feel comfortable going to roll
changes.
call, Judge Rossi? Because we're limited on time. Do you feel comfortable just moving to roll call right now?
Yes.
To move things along?
I think we have to procedurally.
Okay. Danielle, you're on.
And then, yeah, I think we have to.
All right. Alakani.
Yes.
Babcock.
No.
Campbell.
Yes.
Escobedo.
Yes.
Mahoney.
No.
Smith.
Yes.
Judge Rossi.
No.
Okay, that is 4 yeses, 3 noes, so motion passes.
All right. Thanks, Danielle. Thanks everyone for your thoughtful discussion on that. We have been keeping you waiting, Danielle, on the delegation of the HFA.
Yes.
Too.
And how quickly do you need me to move through that?
As quickly as you can.
Okay, great.
I don't think this will be a spirited a discussion, so
sure. Okay, so just a second.
Because we've had this, it's more to update everyone about, what's happening and what we need to do.
Great. Of course, now my computer's there we go. Okay. Zoom. Apologies. You say as quickly as possible and then I can't get it pulled up. Share screen. And PowerPoint. Okay. This is not ideal, but I can't get it into full screen this second.
Oh, it's showing now.
Yeah. I
It's
just would
not in
love
presentation mode, but
yeah, I would love to be able to see my notes, but I don't know if that's gonna happen. So we'll roll with it. Okay, from beginning.
I'll help. I can help if need be.
What version are you all seeing? Yeah, not that one. Okay.
you're seeing as presenter.
Yeah. All right. We'll try this one more time. Okay, this should work. Okay, thanks for your patience. Alrighty, so yeah, we are skipping item 4.2 that was withdrawn from the agenda. So this is item 4.3, a recommendation to delegate authority to the commission asking for the commission to delegate authority to this committee to approve CalHFA 2 supplemental funding awards. So as you likely recall, this committee and the commission worked to administer 2025-2029 CalHFA 2 grants throughout the fall. And those grants are funded through the California National Mortgage Settlement Funds. That initial grant was 24 million minus State Bar administrative fees. The State Bar received 36 applications requesting nearly 80 million in funding, but we only had 22 million available. So the commission ultimately approved funding for 17 grantees last fall. This was a very oversubscribed grant program. After seeing the outsized demand for this grant program, CalHFA, the agency, agreed to release an additional 24 million in those national mortgage settlement funds to the State Bar for additional homeownership preservation work. And they've agreed to allow us to distribute 10 million as supplemental funds to that initial 2025-2029 grant and distribute the remaining 14 million as a new grant later, likely in the latter half of 2027, but we're still kind of figuring out timing on that portion. We split it in this way because we want to get some of these funds out the door as soon as possible. We've heard that layoffs may be occurring at organizations that did not get CalHFA 2 funding or as much as they were hoping, but also want to hold back some of it to see what the demand is as programs get up and running, and give us time to collect data back from those grantees, which would be helpful in making award determinations for that second tranche. So for the supplemental funding, just the 10 million that we want to get out the door right now, it would be eligible or available to all grantees that applied for CalHFA 2 funding, regardless of whether or not they were awarded funds. This is a little different than most of our other supplemental or reallocation opportunities because typically they only roll out to programs that are existing grantees, but it's existing CalHFA 2 recipients. But because there were so many applicants that went unfunded, we wanted to make this available to a larger pool. In terms of how much funding they can request, grantees cannot exceed their original funding requests. So grantees that applied but did not receive CalHFA 2 funding can apply up to that same amount. And those that were funded can apply up to the initial ask minus any funds already awarded. They can be asked to be made whole, essentially, to that initial funding request. And we hope to get these funds out the door as quickly as possible. And so we are aiming for a grant period that would start April 1 of this year and go through the end of the CalHFA 2 grant period, which is June 30, 2029. But again, to facilitate getting the funds to grantees as quickly as possible, letting them be able to spend it as quickly as possible, and helping kind of bridge the gap between CalHFA 1 and CalHFA 2, grantees would be able to charge expenditures back a quarter to January 1, 2026. Given when the contract amendment with CalHFA was signed for this additional 24 million and the end of the year holidays, the earliest staff could realistically build and release this application was January 16th. So we did that earlier, I guess last month. We held a grantee webinar the day before to inform grantees formally of this opportunity and the application requirements. The supplemental applications ask grantees largely how their projects would change if additional funding were to be provided. And for those that did not receive initial funding, the questions provided them an opportunity to strengthen that initial application, make a more compelling argument for the need in their area and their ability to meet that need. We've had 31 applications submitted, and the scoring team is now getting up and running, and we'll take the next 3-ish weeks to review those applications, score them all again, calibrate across all the applications, and craft a funding recommendation. As we know from the initial CalHFA 2 review, it takes some time to develop that funding recommendation and get the memo and related materials through the State Bar review process. So given when we were able to release applications, staff did not find it tenable to score and create a funding recommendation and get through all those approvals ahead of the March 5 commission meeting to bring award recommendations to that meeting. So instead, staff is asking this committee to request the commission delegate authority to PDI to approve those awards a couple weeks later at that newly scheduled March 19th meeting. If the commission agrees, the committee would approve those supplemental awards on March 19th, and then staff would move forward with releasing and reviewing the budgets. And we would work through getting grant agreements released and signed in April, and then funds would be dispersed likely late April, early May. And so this is the proposed resolution. There's additional information in the memo, but should the PDI committee concur, it is resolved that the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission Program Development and Impact Committee recommends the LSTFC delegate authority to the PDI committee to approve 2025-2029 California Housing Finance Agency CalHFA 2 supplemental funding awards. Happy to take any questions.
So everyone understands, basically, because we can't get the recommendations done before the March 5th meeting, we're asking the full commission to give PDI the authority to approve them at our later in March meeting.
Yeah. And I'll say typically for supplemental funding, when it's more routine, kind of just reallocation of additional funds that have come in, staff have the authority in the charters to do that. But because this is a competitive supplemental fund and would likely include funding applicants that are not already funded, is why we felt this needs commission or, if delegated, committee approval to get these funds out the door.
Move approval.
Great. Thanks, Ken.
Yeah, second.
Someone like to second that?
I'll second.
Just a moment.
I'm sorry, I
No,
missed
I'm
you
moving
seconded.
almost too fast. Okay, so it was moved by Babcock, and then the second was who? I'm sorry.
Tammy.
Was who?
Tammy.
Great.
Tammy.
Mahoney. Yep. Perfect. Thank you. All right. Alikani,
Yes.
Babcock,
Yes.
Campbell,
Yes.
Escobedo,
Yes.
Mahoney,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Judge Rosie.
Yes.
Okay. So we have 7 yeses, 0 nos. Motion carries. And I understand we are going to have staff table actually the updates that we had as items 4.4 and 4.5 for some scheduling considerations. Happy to provide more information to commissioners that have questions or concerns about that offline. But we are going to table those 2 staff updates.
And we're going to add that to the March 19th meeting?
Yes, we may need to extend that meeting to do so. We can chat about that.
Okay. All right. Great. We can do that. Okay. Sorry, Kim. Thanks for being here. We're going to hear from you. I promise.
Hey everyone, great to see you. And just to flag really quickly, Danielle, if anyone's interested in our California Legal Aid Interagency Roundtable work, they can always ping me or email me to get updates in the meantime. It's really exciting work. Thank you, everyone. Great meeting today.
Thanks, Kim. Okay. All right. Then that, my friends, is our agenda. And so with that, thank you again for your robust discussion. Nicole, thank you for being here. Nice to meet you. Thanks for being here. Tammy, welcome. It's not always like this. Sometimes it's like this. But as you can see, we're passionate group, so welcome. All right, my friends, thank you. See you in March, if not sooner, and this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you,
Thank
Judge
you.
Rosie. Thank you all.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everybody.
everyone. Good to see you.